Good morning, everyone. My name is Elena Volkova, and I am on the line with Audrey Sawaya of Avantgarde Credit Card Processing Service. This webinar is going to be devoted to the topic of credit card processing, helpful tips for small business owners. I am delighted to have Audrey on the phone with me today. Audrey works very closely with small business owners on setting them up with the most efficient and the most cost-effective ways to process and accept credit cards. I met Audrey at a wonderful presentation that she gave at a BNI meeting, and I was impressed with how devoted she is to the subject matter, how she is explaining very fast that us business owners have with respect to credit card processing. Audrey, I wanted to turn this over to you briefly to introduce yourself to our audience.
Great, thank you. Hi, Elena. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on the call this morning, and I'm looking forward to sharing with everyone more about credit card processing and how the industry is changing. So, yeah, just a little bit about Avantgarde. We were started about 12 years ago. We're based in Dallas, Texas, and our focus is really to help small business owners to really be their advocate and to negotiate on their behalf with a lot of different banks and processors. So we're really familiar with how the industry works, and we really try to be there to provide the best customer service and technical support that we can. So I think I'll just get right into it if that's okay, Elena. So the biggest change that small business owners right now are hearing about is what's called EMV, which is the chip and PIN technology. It's been around in Europe and other countries, Canada, for quite a while, and it's just now finally starting to infiltrate the United States market. You've probably seen it if you've gotten a new credit card anytime recently. You've seen a little gold square that's usually somewhere on the corner of the card. And that little square actually allows for the new credit card machines and the new readers to create an individual transaction ID. So as opposed to, the magnetic strip, which reads the strip every time, it reads the full card number and sends that through to the bank and processor, what this does is it basically encrypts each different transaction. It makes it impossible for that number, for that full card number to be hacked into and taken out, which is why the banks and processors are so excited about this technology, because it will really reduce fraud. I don't know if any small business owners have encountered this, but I've had clients where someone has come in with a card, looks like a legitimate card, they swipe it, they see the ID, everything seems to match, the transaction goes through, and lo and behold, it was actually a fraudulent card. So there are criminals out there who have figured out how to make a fraudulent card. Well, with this new EMV technology, they can't make a fraudulent card with that chip. And in it, it's basically impossible, and the card readers will know immediately that it's not correct. So that's something that is really important. Are we on the second slide? Or
yeah, I switched.
Okay. Sorry. No problem. Yeah, so I just want to make sure. So, so that's a little bit about the EMV, and so that basically requires that most all business owners, upgrade their credit card machines. So what that means in the sense is that any older model machines, eventually, starting in October, are going to be phased out. So October is the first sort of, they call it a soft deadline, meaning that it's not going to be, there's not going to be like the Gestapo in there, trying to take away your credit card machine. But at the same time, there are going to be implications. For example, if someone were to come in to the store and run a transaction that could have been run with the chip, with the EMV chip, and then there's a chargeback dispute or there is fraud, the business can be held liable for up to $10,000. So, there are implications that, consequences that a business owner may have to face if they don't upgrade. And at a certain point, most of the old machines are going to be completely phased out, which means that it won't work at all. So that's one major thing. The other major thing, which we can move on to the next slide, is Apple Pay. And I know a lot of business owners are asking me about this. How can I get it? What is it? How does it work? And a lot of people now have iPhones or have some sort of smartphones, but iPhones obviously dominate the market. So Apple was very smart. They invented their own way to load up a card onto their phone securely. And basically all that a business needs in order to accept Apple Pay is a reader, which, they're not very expensive. They're a couple $100, and they will, most of them will plug into an existing credit card machine of the newer models. And there are a couple of Verifone model machines that will actually read the Apple Pay directly from the phone. And so, it just allows one more way that customers can pay. It's definitely kind of a cool technology. A lot of people, want to start accepting it. But to be honest, at this point, the only major retailers are the ones that are accepting it. For example, Whole Foods. I've seen it, I think Best Buy. There's, some major retailers that have already started accepting it. I know that it was kind of big news that there was actually fraud already on Apple Pay, that some people had figured out how to load up fraudulent cards, and then they actually purchased things at the Apple store with those fraudulent cards. So, even Apple Pay is not immune to fraud, and so, I think that's a good thing to, just to pay attention to and to sort of see how things unfold, because a lot of times there's these great new technologies, and I've seen them in the past several years that I've been, in this industry, that, the big thing with PayPass, everyone's like, let's use PayPass, it's where you're going to be able to just swipe your card, and honestly, it never took off. So, I've seen these things that come and go, so we'll sort of see with Apple Pay. As a small business owner, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you rush to get the new equipment for it. Maybe wait and see how many small businesses really jump on board and if it's worth your while. So that's Apple Pay. Do you have any questions, Lena, or anything you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I wanted to actually kind of step back a little bit and have you outline a typical profile of your clients. So your company helps small business owners to process cards. So you serve as this valuable connecting link between basically me as a consumer having a credit card in my pocket and trying to use it for points or whatever to buy goods and services. And then there is the service provider or the seller of goods on the other side. And I want you to kind of part the clouds or part the curtain behind what happens in between. Like, there's this very complex process in between the simple act of me giving the credit card number to the business owner. How exactly does the business owner get cash by taking plastic? That always seemed like a very mysterious process to me, and I think we all take it for granted, but I wonder if you could just kind of shine the light, like what happens when that plastic changes hands?
Yeah, that's a great question.
And that's something numbers in your exchange, yes.
Yeah, as a consumer, I can say before I got into the industry, I just assumed that, the banks or, whoever it was, Visa, MasterCard, or, some special place just sent the machine and that was it. But there's actually quite a process. So, from the business itself, when the consumer comes in and swipes the card, so that goes through a portal basically and goes through secure servers to the processing bank. So the issuing bank is, they're sending the information to the processing bank. So there's the issuing bank, for example, Chase, Wells Fargo, whoever issued that credit card, and then that's going to the processor, which is then depositing the funds into the business's bank. We've kind of streamlined it in the sense that we sort of have our own servers that oversee everything and make sure that the process is going smoothly. If you can imagine, when credit cards sort of started to actually become electronic, which was, I believe, back in the 70s, a lot of these processors that got started, First Data, Global, they created these huge, back then, if you can imagine, computer systems back in the 70s and 80s, they were huge, huge computers. And so there are still to this day basically large warehouses of computers that these processors are running on. It's nearly impossible for them to really truly upgrade their system to the latest technology because there are so many transactions that are going through every second, on a daily basis. So there's no way to interrupt that process. So what we've done is, although we do have to send through because those are sort of the major processing arms, is we sort of have an extra layer of security which we've created, which kind of oversees it all and makes sure that everything is going smoothly on our end. So if that makes sense, I hope that's not confusing, but essentially it's going through a few different portals in order to get to the business owner, and then the business owner usually has access to the funds within 24 to 48 hours, depending on how they're set up. So.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, is because it's actually for the small business owner and a lot of the people who haven't started using, accepting credit cards in their business and are on this call contemplating starting to accept credit cards. The big caveat is that, let's say, unlike when you are a consumer, accepting credit card doesn't mean you have the money in the bank instantaneously. And depending on the credit card processor, some credit card processors and credit card companies take a while to deposit money into your account. So let's say you sold a particular item on day one, you may not see the net price or the net proceeds from that transaction for up to 3 days, depending on the company. I mean, some are faster than others. Like Audrey, you're saying that Avantgarde deposits funds within 24, 48 hours. I've seen clients struggling with their processors and sometimes not seeing money for 3 or 4 days. In fact, I've seen companies, the credit card processing companies, where they would deposit the money and then renege on the deposit, saying, "Oh, and by the way, that was a mistake. The money never cleared the other side." So that could be a big caveat and a big lesson to watch out for when you are choosing the company to process and kind of help you clear transactions.
That's very true. I've seen that as well, and oftentimes they're actually floating that money because they're making money on the they're getting the money first, and then they're taking those couple of days to make some interest on that money. So it's really not fair in that sense. The business owner obviously needs that cash flow. So yeah, I mean, we have a few different options, but for most of our clients, the cutoff time is 11 p.m. and the money will be in the account the next morning. So it's definitely important for a lot of businesses, especially in this day and age with so many expenses and things to look out for. Having that money right away is very helpful. So thanks for bringing that up, for sure.
Well, I know I'm bringing this up because this is a topic of probably utmost concern for most of my clients because, I represent a lot of people who provide services, and therefore the amount of their daily transactions are in the thousands sometimes. So not having that $1,000 or $5,000 available for 2 or 3 days, that's a strain on the cash flow of a business. So let's say if you're launching a large program and you need the revenue to pay for the expenses of launching that program, that is a huge strain, and that's something that needs to be carefully considered. And I think I wanted to also highlight another caveat. So when people are shopping for the credit card processing company, why do people always flock to PayPal? What is the story? What is the myth? Because, I mean, I've used it early on for when I was running a nonprofit, and I had a very unsatisfying experience. I wanted to get your expert opinion of, like, what is the story with PayPal? Why did it kind of dominate the psyche of our small business owners, and why do they think it's an easy way to go?
Well, I think PayPal was one of the first sort of companies to come into the marketplace where they made it very easy to accept credit cards. Now you have companies like Square and, you know, some others that are coming into the market. But with PayPal, you know, there's no monthly fee. It's very easy to set up. And in the beginning, you know, it was a novel idea, which, you know, for certain businesses, it still is an okay portal. But at the same time, like you said, there are a lot of drawbacks. You know, the customer service is difficult to get a hold of. I know that the rates are higher as well. I think it's like a flat fee of like around 3%, 2.8 or 3, something like that. So, you know, overall the rates are higher. But, you know, for certain businesses that maybe they're just taking it once in a blue moon, maybe just once every couple of months or not all the time, then it's you know, maybe a viable option. But for a business that's accepting at least, you know, a couple $1,000s in credit card processing a month, there are definitely better options. So, yeah, I find that that PayPal, you know.
There's something, I mean, I've heard stories of dispute resolution function with PayPal. I've heard stories of PayPal sort of not being very small business focused and protective when it comes to potentially standing up and, you know, prosecuting frivolous cancellations and helping the small business owner assert its rights with respect to being paid.
Right. Definitely, I've heard that as well. You know, and again, I think it comes back to that their model is so different. I mean, because they really started, I think, more for people to be able to pay, you know, through online, and then sort of merged into, okay, why don't we have business owners be able to accept that? And then it just kind of became like a credit card processing platform. That, like you said, it kind of is more on the side of the consumer, less for the business. You know, I find also a similar situation with Square, that, you know, Square now is sort of dominating the market. And I had a client who, they own an art gallery, and it's not uncommon for them to have very large transactions, and they had a transaction for about $10,000, which for them is not huge, that they put through Square, and then they never saw their money. They never saw it deposited. So, you know, after hours and hours of being on hold with the customer service from Square and trying to figure it out, Square is basically just one big funnel where all, you know, hundreds of millions of different merchants are connected to it. So it's not an individual merchant account. It's basically one umbrella account. So, you know, that one transaction from that art gallery was lost in the middle of, you know, thousands of transactions. And basically what had happened was Square had flagged it because it was, in their minds, you know, a large transaction, and it was, I think it was a foreign credit card, because, you know, the person buying was from a different country. So, you know, all of these things in their mind made it suspicious. Well, you know, 6 months later, the business finally got their $10,000, and that really put a strain on them. So, you know, those are things I think to look out for. Some of these options, they seem easy and they seem, you know, great in the beginning, and then you sort of start to find these pitfalls with them. So,
right. And then I think, I don't know if you're going to cover it later in your presentation, but I also wanted to stress that professional credit card processing companies like yours also provide a very robust accounting and account statement information with respect to every transaction, whereby it's actually fairly easy to match payments and potential the fees paid on those payments, and also track them to the invoices. I don't know if you separately, but having clear accounting is another huge advantage.
You're right, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I mean, nowadays with our company, we do have online web reporting similar to online banking, where you can go on and check your transactions every day. And in addition to that, we have ways through our Gateway portal that we created where those transactions can link up with most versions of QuickBooks, which is also really helpful. So, yeah, accounting is so important, and I think for every small business owner, just staying on top of transactions and what's happening and being able to navigate that is really crucial. So anything we can do to help with that is really important.
Okay. I see on your slide that we have on the screen, your slide 4 is the Durbin Amendment. If you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Durbin Amendment is something that passed, a couple years ago now, but it's still having major implications, and I am shocked to see how many small businesses are actually not taking advantage of the new pricing that's available because of this Durbin Amendment. So what it is there was a Senator Durbin, who passed through this amendment where essentially it regulates the cost of debit cards. So I'm sure you can understand that when a consumer comes in and they purchase something with a debit card, that money is actually in their checking account, and it's going straight through the processor to the business. There's no real risk. It's not like with a credit card where the credit card company is fronting the money and then they're waiting to receive the payment. This is money that's literally in the bank going to the business owner. So, this senator said it's unfair that the Visa and MasterCard are charging upwards of 1.5%, 2% for a debit card. It's not fair. So he basically locked it in at a price of 0.05% and 22 cents. So that gets locked in. Now, the great news is that most businesses can take advantage of that pricing. The bad news is that most small businesses maybe don't know about it, or their processors aren't letting them know about it and aren't actually passing on those lower rates to them. They could still be passing on a 1.5 or even, I've seen even higher, which is basically just robbery because they're paying the price of 0.05%, but then they're passing on a rate of over 1 or 1.5% to, or even 2 to the business owner. So it's with the interchange pricing structure, that's where you actually can get that exact price of 0.05%, and that's what most of our clients are taking advantage of, the interchange pricing. There's certain situations where it may make sense to do other pricing, but in 90% of the cases, the interchange pricing is the direct wholesale rate, and then we just have a very small, like less than 0.25% that we charge above that in order to pay for our costs. But that's a huge help, and I've seen businesses save literally thousands and thousands of dollars. I had a restaurant that was doing almost over 50%, and actually most of the clients that I see are doing over 50% debit. But when you can imagine when the savings, when they're paying over a 1.5% for a debit card and it goes down that much, the savings can be tremendous. So that's really important for small business owners to know about, and to take a look at their processing statement. And that's usually what I do with my clients in the beginning, is I'll sit down with them and take a look at their current processing statement. And I'm trained to look for certain things. The one thing is, most of the banks and processors, they make the statements impossible to understand. And you literally have to have a PhD in math, and even then, it's so difficult. I've been doing this for a number of years, and even still, like when I look at those statements, sometimes I want to pull my hair out because the way that they format it, and they hide fees in weird places. And so honestly, we have a whole analysis department in our company, which at this point, just because I'm too busy, but I usually just send most of the statements that I receive from business owners that want me to review it. I send most of those to our analysis department because they have, we have accountants on staff that are trained to know exactly what all the fees are and be able to plug them into spreadsheets to figure out, what the business owner is really paying and how much we can potentially save them. So, I just have to put that in because it's not as easy as saying, hey, take a look at your statement and figure out if you've got this Durbin Amendment pricing, because most likely it's difficult to see that. But
well, Audrey, that is a huge pressure point. I know for some of my clients, definitely for me, this is exactly the frustration I'm having currently with my processor, which is QuickBooks Intuit, because I use QuickBooks Intuit online, and it's very convenient for me that my invoices get paid somewhat automatically. But what happened was there was this one client using a debit card, and apparently there was not enough money in that account, and so the transaction got credited to me, then it got discredited from me, and all along I got charged the fee. Now that I'm thinking about it, and you are raising it for the service, I got charged the regular credit card processing fee as opposed to the debit card fee, even though we were dealing with a debit account, which is, you would never know this unless a specialist like you were to look and actually highlight this for you. And the other thing is, again, I've tried Square, I've tried PayPal, I've tried now QuickBooks. There's not a report that I get. I can log into my account and potentially piece things together. But again, the name of the client is usually not there. There's this mystic number that relates to the transaction, and we kind of have to piece it together and figure out which date it was and what invoices was used. But in the end, the reporting is actually just extra work for my bookkeeper to figure out. So I'm glad that you're raising all these important issues for small business owners to look and potentially demand from when they are in the market for upgrading their credit card processing situation, so they know that a more sophisticated, more experienced credit card processing companies like you actually have experts on staff to help them deal with this in the most efficient manner.
Exactly, yes. Yeah, and you do raise a good point because, a lot of, for example, like you mentioned Intuit, PayPal, Square, their pricing model is a sort of a one-size-fits-all. It's a, bundled rate of 2.5–3%. And so basically that's where they're making a lot of extra money on the debit card. So, again, for certain businesses, it makes perfect sense to go with that model. For businesses that may be processing a good amount of debit or have more transaction volume, it's definitely something to pay attention to. So,
right. So I'm going to take us over to slide 5. Here you're talking about American Express, about their new pricing structure and some of the other highlights.
Yes. So for years, American Express, basically forever, American Express has been their own processing arm. A lot of small businesses know that basically they were, fixed with their rate structure. If you were a restaurant, you paid 3.5%. If you were a retail shop, you paid 2.89, and basically they had these different categories, and there was really no way around it. And so a lot of businesses actually stopped taking American Express because that fee was just too high for them. And so I think American Express now is starting to realize that they don't want to lose that business, and they don't want to put that negative taste into a business. They don't want to have that negative connotation out there. And so because of that, they came out with this new program, which is only available through certain processors at the moment. And, we do have access to it through 2 of our processors. But essentially what it does is it lowers the rates for American Express, similar to how with Visa and MasterCard there are different categories. For example, if it's a rewards card, if it's a debit card, if it's a business card, there's different categories. So that's essentially how American Express has done it, as well as a category for when it's keyed in over the phone. So there's, 4 or 5 different categories. But for example, for a restaurant, instead of 3.5%, it can be as low as like 2.5%, sometimes 3%. So it's reducing the rates for the businesses, which, I had a restaurant just last month that they do almost 50% of their business American Express, and it saves them about $4,000 a year. So it's quite a substantial amount of money that can go back into the business owner's pocket by getting on one of this new pricing structure. And so the major qualification for it is that the business has to be processing less than $1 million a year. I know that sounds kind of crazy. Well, why would American Express put that sort of qualification on it? The reason is because with this new pricing structure, the processors are basically taking that account in-house. And American Express wants to keep the larger accounts within their jurisdiction. So the sort of smaller mid-range American Express accounts can come over to the processors with this new program. And so basically what it also allows is it allows, for example, for our company to take over the customer service aspect for American Express, meaning if there's a chargeback or a dispute or retrieval inquiry, that would go through our customer service, whereas before it actually had to go to American Express directly, which just eliminates one more step as well for the business owner. Instead of having to think, oh, it's American Express, I have to call this other number. There's just one number to call, just one platform to go through. And as well, the other big bonus on it is that it provides next-day funding on American Express, which has been a huge issue as well for a lot of small businesses, that American Express takes an extra 2 to 3 days to deposit. So whereas, I mentioned before we have a late cutoff where you'll get your money next day, well, on this new program, American Express would be included in that. So everything would come at once as opposed to Visa, MasterCard, and then 2 more days later, American Express, which is how it was before. So all of these are major bonuses, can definitely help out a business. Most businesses can benefit from it. The only business that I've seen that there's very little benefit is medical practitioners, because for some reason they basically made it so that pricing is more or less the same as what they were giving them before. I believe it was like 2.5%. So basically what we're offering to the medical practitioner with this program is mostly identical to what American Express offers. So I've run into that several times with doctors and dentists where, basically it wouldn't really save them much. If they want the next day funding, they can still jump on board with it, but it's not a huge saving. So, but other than that, with retail, with restaurants, with even a lot of e-commerce and key entered transactions. For example, there was a flower shop that I recently helped out that does quite a lot of American Express, and by getting on this program, again, it saved them, I believe, like $10,000 a year. So it was really a lot, because of the huge majority of their transactions. And they actually just fell underneath the $1 million mark. They were like, I think, $800,000 in American Express. So they just squeaked in to the program. So so that's an exciting addition as well.
It sounds to me that, and the big lesson I'm taking away is that as the revenue grows for small business, revenue from accepting credit cards and debit cards grows, it's important for the business owner to take a break, slow down, and get the bookkeeper and a specialist like you in-house to review how much the business is paying in credit card processing fees, because those numbers, let's say you started out with a small business accepting occasional credit cards here and there through Square, paying $300 a year for the convenience was not a big deal. But as your credit card fees start to inch into thousands, every little bit starts to count, and so those small percentages going from, let's say, 3.5 to 2.5 could save you thousands of dollars, and that's where tremendous return on the small business owner's time and effort to potentially shift the credit card process around and find the right provider, find the right customer service, find the right advocate for protecting their receivables, and not potentially also to not find them in a situation where they are dealing with an amateur credit card processor that is charging a lot of money and not providing any customer support or service. I mean, that seems to me that that's probably, if there's any takeaway from what you're describing here, is as your numbers start to grow, it becomes a paramount order of business to look into, setting up professional relationship with people who can truly help you.
Definitely, Elena, and I know that you can attest to this, that it's so important as well to really review all of the contracts and review everything that you're getting from this potential processing company. I've seen horror stories where, the business owner didn't really know what they were signing, and they signed themselves into, 3-4 year leases, sometimes paying upwards of $100, $200 for a piece of equipment that might actually only cost $300 or $400, one time, and they're actually paying that. And once they sign that lease, most times it's a non-cancelable lease. So I've seen that happen time and again. And a lot of times the business owners, they just say, well, I trusted the salesperson. I didn't realize what I was signing. I know you can attest to this, how important it is to have somebody, on your side who's at least just reviewing it and making sure that what they're signing is exactly what was proposed to them. So.
I have seen a number of horror stories. I have also seen a number of very unfavorable credit card processing agreements whereby there were exorbitant fees, very, very high fees and penalties for chargebacks. They were provisions that would allow the credit card processing company to basically freeze processing if there was, let's say, 5 chargebacks in a certain period of time, or there was a large amount in chargebacks. And sometimes you can't predict that. And just for people who haven't thankfully experienced what a chargeback is, it's really a situation where a client or a consumer paid you with a credit card and then 5 days later or some time later changed their mind, called their credit card company and said, please cancel that charge. I do not want to pay for it anymore. And usually it takes two to tango. There's usually fault on both sides of the transaction. Maybe there was some misunderstanding. Maybe there was some kind of disagreement where people got upset. Be that as it may, but you can't, as a consumer, you generally don't have the right to pull your money back willy-nilly. And so this also ends up being a huge penalty for small business owner, both from the point of view they're losing the sale, but they're also getting a penalty from their credit card company processor saying, oh, and by the way, you have a large number of chargebacks. You're probably doing something wrong. Maybe you are not a reliable business card. The good ones maybe look the relationship and trust and some kind of support, but the large warehouse type of credit card processing companies, they drop the squeaky wheels. They are not going to be looking kindly upon any kind of chargebacks, and that could backfire and end up costing you a lot of money.
Yeah, and that's something that I definitely advise all of my clients to work with. If they have a customer that's upset, really to work with the customer, find out a way to come up with a solution. A chargeback is the worst possible scenario. It does happen, and sometimes it's completely out of the business owner's hands. And sometimes it is literally just somebody trying to, take advantage and, say that they didn't pay for something when they really did. Or it's a case of fraud. But otherwise, if it's just a dispute and you know that the person is threatening to do a chargeback, find a way to resolve it. It really makes it so much easier for everyone involved. So.
Yeah. That's definitely something to keep an eye out. Those chargebacks can really trip you up, and also you wouldn't even know it unless you actually, encounter a situation like that. But by that time, it's too late to renegotiate or find protections against that. I wanted to move us a little bit on further on in your presentation. On your slides here, you're talking about PCI compliance. If you could talk a little bit more about that for us.
Yeah, so that's the new security measures that Visa and MasterCard have put in place, actually American Express as well. What it does is it ensures that there are best practices in place for the small business owner so that there aren't any security breaches. Basically what that means is not to leave credit card numbers lying around. If you are going to take a credit card number over the phone, shred it immediately. one of the great things about the system we developed is that once you put it into our system online, it's securely stored and you don't have to worry about it again. But with a lot of the credit card machines, the older models, they're no longer compliant, which means that they're not sending the information through in an encrypted manner. So a lot of those older model machines are being discontinued. And in addition, it requires, if you are, let's say, running a computer system or a point-of-sale system, that you have certain firewalls and security measures in place. Most of the credit card companies, with the point-of-sales, most of them are up to date with all the compliance, but it's something to check into, especially if it's an older model point-of-sale or computer system. But the point that I really want to drive home here is that this whole measure has been an excuse for a lot of credit card processing companies to overcharge or to put in extra fees that they call compliance fees or data monitoring fees or, yearly compliance fees. And I see it all the time. Almost all the processors charge it, and it's something that we've really gone to bat on behalf of our small business owners to say either it's the absolute minimum that we can get or nothing at all, as long as they answer, the business owner answers certain questions and agrees, not to do a lot of, not to keep the credit card numbers on file and things like that. So, that's something that small business owners should be aware of, that it's an excuse, an extra way for the processors to charge another fee on top of everything else, because they say that they're ensuring compliance, when really that fee isn't really doing anything for the small business owner. It's not actually making them compliant. It's not actually even securing them. If there were a data breach, the business owner would still be liable, and that money they were paying monthly really doesn't insure them against anything. So that's really the major thing with the PCI compliance to be aware of.
Right, and PCI stands for Personal Confidential Information?
I believe so.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm not even 100% sure. I think it does, yes.
It became such a sort of term in the industry that it is, huge priority, and it really what it also means and translates for all the small business owners who are collecting, even if they're not storing, but generally collecting credit card information or any other kind of confidential information from clients, is that they have an obligation to keep it confidential. There has to be reasonable precautions, and a service provider like you basically becomes a partner with a small business owner by helping institute the right types of precautions to minimize exposure. Of course, you can't limit, because there's always ways that things cannot be perfect. But having the expertise of a professional credit card company for a small business owner, that becomes invaluable. And I just wanted to really emphasize that and make sure that if you're not, for those of you who are listening and not getting the support you need in terms of compliance and best business practices from your credit card processing, it definitely is something to consider, and potentially a red flag that you might be having a blind spot in your security procedures.
Yes, and one more thing as well, Lena, is just that, I do have clients that ask me, has our system ever been breached? And absolutely not. We have absolutely a lot of security in place, a huge technology department that oversees all of that. Several years ago, there was a major processor that was hacked into, and millions of dollars worth of credit cards were stolen and used fraudulently. And there are still businesses that are reeling from that. So, just to reiterate that as well, that it can also be on the processor side. So,
right.
Keep that in mind.
And so the idea, of course, is that when people use your company, the information, the credit card information, is really stored on your servers. So
right. Mm-hmm. And it's actually through a technology called tokenization, where that number is actually created into a unique ID. So even if somebody, was very sophisticated and knew how to hack into our servers, and they wouldn't be able to pull the information because it's encoded.
But that's assuming that the card is actually physically present at the time of sale, and it's kind of scanned or not manually input. Of course, manual input of any credit card information increases the likelihood of fraud. Is that what your experience?
Well, definitely in the sense that, yeah, when you're taking the number over the phone or you don't see the card physically, there is a lot more chance that perhaps that is a stolen card. So it's definitely. I also have some best practices that I encourage clients to do. Always get the 3-digit code that's on the back of the card, and always get the billing address and make sure that that matches. That's something that we can actually set up in our system so that if someone is doing a lot of key enter transactions, that if those things don't match, it actually won't let the transaction go through. So it's something we can turn on and off, but it's something that's good to have because if, for example, that it does flag and it does, stop the transaction, then, you can investigate a little further and make sure, why is this happening? Did you do not have the code? Is your billing address, did it just change recently? You can find out if there's a legitimate reason or if, in fact, it is a stolen card. So.
Do you have a function, do you offer a function where we can keep a credit card for a particular client or customer on file? So let's say we took down manually credit for the first transaction, and then later on the client comes back and asks, okay, and charge the card you have on file for me. Do you have a function where a business owner retrieve that information, process?
Yes. So actually, if you can go to slide 8, I know we're skipping a little bit, but if you can go to slide 8, that's the gateway solution. So we actually have our own gateway that we created that is the latest technology, and it's a virtual terminal where it's super easy to use. The business owner can go in, put in the information of the client, the consumer, and then they can check a box that says, safely store in the customer safe. That means that later they can go in and just put in the first or last name of the customer or the email, and it will pull up that customer's name and the last 4 digits of that card. So that's a great feature to have, and like I said, everything is stored with a token, completely safe in our secure servers, so there's absolutely no, concern about that card number being stolen. And the great thing too is that it's completely mobile. It can work on any platform on a tablet, phone, computer. So and the business owner has their unique username and login, and they go in and enter that information. So no one else has access to it.
Oh, that's great. That's helpful. One of the things that often come up, and I wanted to give you a chance to go back to your slide 7, and here you talk about wireless technology. Could you just explain a little bit about that? How does that become relevant for?
Yeah, well, we have a lot of clients who are doing business on the go, whether it be a plumber that's going from here to there, or it could be people that do trade shows. I have a comic book store that does almost a lot of their business out at trade shows. So they actually have a wireless credit card machine that runs off of a cellular network that they can take with them and use anywhere that they have cell phone signal, which is really great. And the latest machines run off of the 4G network, so they're a lot faster and a lot more reliable. There are situations where if you try to use it in the basement or somewhere where you don't have, cell signals, that it doesn't work, but 9 times out of 10 it does. So that's really, really helpful. And then the other type of wireless technology runs off of Bluetooth. So what it does is it actually creates a signal within an area, a range. So this is more for like a retail store that maybe wants to be able to move their credit card machine around, or wants to be able to, for example, like a car dealership that maybe, they need to have that terminal at different desks at different times. It works really well for that. And so it just creates that Bluetooth connection between the router and the credit card machine. And then the machine rests on a base when it's not moving around, and it charges up, and then you can just move it wherever you want and charge the transaction. So that's a really cool technology that pretty much just came out.
Is that an app that people download on their iPhone, or is it a separate device?
No, so that's actually a separate device. That's actually an actual credit card machine that's instead of running off of, the old machines ran off of phone lines, and newer versions run, connected to the router through an Ethernet cable. Well, these new machines can actually run wirelessly, meaning they don't have to be connected by a wire to anything. But what you're talking about, if you can actually go to slide 8, back to the gateway solutions, that's where basically so we're launching an app. I know that a lot of companies do have apps where you can go to the app and then, run your transactions. With our gateway that I mentioned before, you can actually do that on any phone. It's responsive. So it's not necessarily an app, but it's a mobile site that you go to and run the transactions. Now, a lot of times, with Square, you see the little white square that you plug into the headphone jack. The one thing to know about that is that square is actually not encrypted. So, anyone could, basically steal that device, and if they knew how, they could take the information out of there. So, there's some security concern with that, so we're actually developing a totally encrypted device that will be able to hook into telephones and iPads and tablets and such. But essentially, it is a good question, because I know everyone is looking for ways to pay on the go and make it super simple. We do have a lot of clients that are using it just on their phone the way that it is now, but when we have the swiper, it'll definitely be more helpful.
Yeah. Well, in my personal experience, I do forget the swiper all the time, but I do plug in, go into the mobile portal, the app, and just plug in the numbers right then and there, and that often ends up maybe not the most efficient way, but the one that becomes the most natural.
Yeah.
We're trained to do things, and then changing old habits becomes a little hard. But it sounds to me that even in that case, the security, if it's not top notch, but it's good enough, and it's still above market.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to move you over to slide 9. Here you're talking about iPad point of sale solutions. If you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's basically, there's so many that have come into the market now. You may have heard of ShopKeep. There's one called NCR Silver that we're very familiar with. There's one called Breadcrumbs, which is specifically for restaurants. There's another called Labu, which is specifically for restaurants. There's one called Revel. There's a number of them that have flooded the marketplace. What's great about them is that instead of in the past where you had to have, a computer and everything had to be stored there, this is all stored in the cloud. So it just makes it so much more simple in terms of all of your inventory is stored there. If anything is to happen to your device, iPad or what have you, you just go out, replace that device, and all your information comes right back into the app. They're basically apps that you download onto your iPad, and then there's usually a monthly fee associated. I know with NCR Silver it's like $59. I think Revel is a little bit higher. The rest of them tend to be, in that range or maybe a little bit more. So, it's a great something to think about. I know a lot of small businesses need help tracking inventory and keeping track of employees. It actually does paperless receipts, so when people can sign right there on the iPad and it's stored directly. You can also do marketing and social media through the program, through their back office. So you capture people's emails when they check out, and so it'll email them a receipt, and in turn you actually save that email, and you can use that for promotions or, it'll actually automatically send out to your customer if you desire, where let's say you haven't seen that customer in a few days or a week or a month or what have you, it'll send something out to them, that you customize that says, hey, we're having this promotion or this deal or, haven't seen you in a while, that sort of thing. So just another great way to sort of maximize efficiency in the business and make things more streamlined.
And that's something
it will run the credit card too directly.
Great. So that's something that Avantgarde actually offers with theirs.
Yeah, we do. We offer it, and certain ones we offer exclusively, and then we integrate with a lot of them. So the ones that we don't necessarily sell in-house, we still support them and can work with them. So absolutely, yes.
So I wanted to move over to your final slide, which is gift loyalty card programs. If you could elaborate a little bit on that, and then I have a few questions at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've probably seen these cards around. They're huge, in major retailers like Starbucks and Walmart, and even McDonald's has their own gift card. Pretty much every retailer now has them. And the reason is because they sell 10 times more than gift certificates, and they're totally trackable. And so people really, they were, I think, the number one gift at most holidays last year. I'm sure we've all received one, and we probably have one or two in our wallet that we've never used, or mean to go back and use fully. And that's where, there's a lot of breakage with that. That's what they call it in the industry, where basically people have put, let's say, $50 on a card. They used $40. Now that $10 is still sitting on the card. Either they're going to come back and spend another $20, or that $10 is just going to become pure profit for the business owner. So there's so many reasons why it works great for businesses, and it can also be used as a promotional tool, and that's something that we really, go into a lot of training with our clients on how to use the cards, how to put them in people's hands, how to, use them at auction events, for different ways to get the customer in the door. So it can actually be a tool that brings new customers in. And then in addition, it can also be a loyalty card where when people come in and they, purchase a certain amount of items or a certain number of, a certain dollar amount, that can turn into points that the customer can then use, within the store or, use for their next purchase. So it's a great way to reward the customers, keep the customers coming back, differentiate yourselves. I know, we see these loyalty reward points everywhere, and the reason is because they work. You want your customers coming to you instead of going down the street to someone else. So that's something we've been very successful with. So I think that's really all that I have prepared, but I don't know if you have any final questions.
Right. The questions we received this one, some of the people I know, when they accept a large amount in the form of a credit card, let's say if it's $5,000 to conduct, for example, a large transaction for a client, they feel that because the credit card processing fee is going to be large, basically they will receive, like 2.5% will be deducted off the top of that $5,000. They feel that in order to somehow offset that loss, they actually charge clients more for the privilege of accepting a credit card. So that $5,000 ends up being, for the client, actually more like $5,200. So the price is not then the same. I know I have reservations about such business practices. I know it's not always compliant with the terms of the vendor agreement, but could you talk a little bit about on your end, like whether it's allowed, like what are the repercussions and what are the penalties for potentially not charging the same price?
That's a good question, and actually, so as part of the Durbin Amendment, federally, it actually allows for such practices. However, a lot of states have laws against it. So I think it's about 20 or 30 states have laws against it. I know New York is one that does have a law against it. There are only certain types of businesses that are allowed to do that. One such type is real estate management companies. So if someone is paying for their rent on a credit card, it is allowed for the management company to charge a fee. but in most other instances, it's not allowed. It's illegal in New York State. So, what are the implications? I mean, someone could have a lawsuit filed against them. They could, lose the ability to accept credit cards. But really, I think the bigger implication, because, that's possible, but I think, like you said, it puts a bad taste in the customer's mouth, and then, you don't want your customers to feel like they don't want to come back to you, So I think that's really the bigger consequence, is that it makes the customer mad, I know that what some businesses have done is they've actually given a discount if someone pays via check or via cash, and that is actually allowed. So you can offer a discount. So it's kind of the same thing but in a different way. But I think it comes across maybe a little bit nicer that, okay, if I pay you via check or cash, you'll give me a discount. But if I pay via credit card, the price is going to be what it is.
Right. And, of course, clients, and I hear it all the time, of course I'm going to use my credit card because I'm going to get points on this particular purchase.
Right.
That's the choice people are making. And another question that came up is consumers sometimes would come to the store and they say, we do not accept credit cards for anything less than, if the purchase is less than $10. And those kinds of stores, I mean, that never would happen in a Starbucks or any other reputable chain. Mm-hmm. Mom and pop stores where they are trying to cut corners every which way. What are our rights as consumers? Like, is it worth to even say, if that's illegal, you shouldn't be doing that? Because sometimes I get very indignant and I want to say something, and then I'm like, well, I understand. What's your position on that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it did not used to be legal. It didn't used to be allowed, but now it actually is allowed. So there's no law against it, and there's no penalty for it with the credit card companies. The reason a lot of businesses do it is because of that transaction fee. So if you'll remember back when I mentioned about the regulated debit, the transaction fee is set at 22 cents. Now, for most businesses that have an average ticket over $20, $30, that 22 cents isn't a big deal. But when you go into a bodega and you want to buy a coffee or a sandwich for $5, that 22 cents actually becomes a large percentage of the transaction. So that's why they have a minimum, is that they're trying to, basically justify the credit card fee, if that makes sense, because of the transaction fee.
It does.
Yeah.
Well, we're at the top of the hour. We're running slightly over our time limit. Of course, there's a lot of information. I wanted to give you an opportunity to explain to our listeners how they can work with you, and also highlight once again the benefits of working with a sophisticated, professional, experienced credit card processing company like Avantgarde.
Thank you. Well, absolutely. I mean, clients can feel free to give me a call. I can give out my number at the end. And, working with a company like Avantgarde is really helpful because you do get that customer service where you get basically an advocate, someone who's there on your side, trying to get you a really fair deal. And one of the things we really strive for is complete transparency, total honesty. That's something that we're founded on and the owners are very big on. And, we have one of the highest retention rates in the industry, so I think that speaks volumes about, clients really like to work with us. They want to work with us. They refer people to us. So we would love the opportunity to work with anyone who's on the line or anyone else you may know who may have a business that could use our services. So I guess I can just give my number. That's probably the easiest way. My number is 646-331-0990. And I'll give that one more time. Just do have it, 646-331-0990. So thanks so much, Elena, for asking me to do this. It's been a pleasure, and I've enjoyed our time.
And thank you very much for your insight. I learned a lot, and I'm already thinking that there's more stuff that we can discuss together in the future. Thank you so much, Audrey.
Thanks, Elena. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.